Well, hello, my name is Pastor Henry Green, and I want to welcome you to the Code. Today, you're going to see something that you hardly ever see. Three generation of black men chopping it up. And we just know whatever it is, we can figure it out together. So I've had the privilege of working with these gentlemen for quite a while, and I've seen their rise into a new level of success. So I want each one to introduce themselves and the group they represent and just give us a quick snippet of the things you've accomplished in the last 10 years.
Hello, my name is Dwayne Lloyd, aka the 818 Original. I am a screenwriter, Hollywood screenwriter. I wrote a show, Nuck and Futz, and it was sold to a cable outlet. And I am just, doing my thing there. I'm looking forward to branching out into, other arenas, man. And I that guy. I just want to be that guy who entertains and edifies people. So, welcome to the Code, and I'm so glad to be here.
Greetings and good evening, everybody. I'm Tari Patterson, international strategist, brand manager, and owner of Authentic Movement. Serving, your industry's best and brightest, whether that is corporate America, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, or some of your famous actors and TV strategists and TV producers. The beauty of this conversation is that you get to see three generations of African-American men having conversations about things that actually have helped them grow and gain and launch into their destiny. So sit back, relax, and welcome to the Code.
And I'm Henry Green. I'm the senior and founding pastor of Emmaus Christian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. But I have 10 projects where we've revitalized malls in underserved areas. And all of them are creating entrepreneurs and business owners for economic empowerment. And so let's start with this question. Like, when you were at that stage, when you were still in the early days of the grind, what made you decide to go after your chosen field? What was the moment, or what was the motivation to get you to pursue what you did?
For me, it was a matter of I've never been a guy that like people control my narrative, and people and society has a way of doing that. When they put a label on something and they look at it like, this is what we want to push out there. So there was a period in Hollywood where I was watching the people who are responsible for Black films and the image of Black people. They were controlling the narrative. Now, we all seen the Hollywood shuffles and stuff like that, and that stuff's real. That's as real as it gets. But I felt like as this is 2021. Why do we allow people to dictate and determine our narrative? And so that's where I went and got to a place. I was like, Lord, you know what? Help me to be one of those catalysts to present the proper narrative of Black men, particularly, because while Black women are of importance to me because I have Black daughters and women in my family who are Black, I was more concerned with Black men because it seemed as though Black men didn't have that voice. You know what I mean? Like we've talked about on the show before. White women have been the most influential sect of American society. White men have controlled everything. Black women are the most educated. So then where did Black men fit in? And that was my issue. It was like, you know what? I don't like having people controlling the narrative and saying, this is where Black men fit in. No. And it was in that place that I was like, you know what? I'm ready to start telling accurate stories of Black men, because we ain't all drug dealers. We ain't all pimps. We ain't all, run around smoking, doing whatever, do any and everything. No, that's not who we are. In fact, when Black men open their mouths as preachers, as rappers, whatever, we are the most powerful human beings on planet Earth. No disrespect to Black women, no disrespect to white women or white men, but nothing like Black men. Trust me when I tell you that.
I think for me, echoing exactly what Dee just said, I work in an industry as a brand ambassador and as a creator and a creative that helps to manage the images of people and their brands and their businesses. The same thing. One of the reasons why I decided to do authentic movement and working to get into strategy and helping to manage people's images and their talents and their brands and their gifts is because I got tired of this narrative that was false, that was being pushed about people who look like me. I'm a Black man, and I've lived both lives. I've been through the struggle, watched my parents struggle, watched my siblings struggle, and the Lord allowed me to achieve this goal at the highest of heights, to be working with some of the industry's most phenomenal people, and to not just serve, but to create and to protect and build their brands. And so for me, being in ministry as well, being a minister, and always keeping those foundational principles, you want to be authentic and you want to be integral in your approach. And more often than not, am I walking into meetings, and whether that is an A&R meeting, or it's a brand meeting with a big time, agency looking for them to display color. And many times it's ruffling of feathers because I'm a Black man, and I'm unapologetic about that. If I'm in this room and I'm in this space and I have a client here that I'm managing and I'm working with, you're going to make sure that you represent them and our people properly. And if you can't do that, then we're going to walk out, because what I do realize is that when they want you, they'll adjust. And so to me, putting those things on paper, on contract, and making it clear that my clients, when we walk in this room, this is what we're doing. You're not just representing you, you're representing us. And I think that as a business owner, as a multimillionaire, as a person who can call shots, who can go and come as he pleases, fly wherever I want to fly, do whatever I want to do, it's important to make sure that the narratives are absolutely right.
For me, I had a painful moment that kind of crystallized who I think I've been my entire life. So there was an incident where a young man was shot by the police, and we didn't have all the details, but they went to the grand jury system, which is a highly rigged system, and nothing's going to change until we change that process. But the prosecutor decided what information he would present to the grand jury. The other side never had an opportunity to tell their story or to introduce evidence or their interpretation of the evidence. And so the grand jury decided not to bring charges. And it wasn't that I was on one side or the other, but I believe everybody should have a chance to have their say. And so the attorney was a friend of mine and asked, could they do a press conference at our church, which is attached to a mall facility. And late the evening before the press conference, I got a cease and desist from our landlord, and that kind of threatened our existence and implied that we did not have the right to do that. And I felt neutered and controlled because I did not own my space. And so I think that's one of the challenges for Black people, is that so often, whatever game we're playing inside of something that somebody else owns. And so that gave me a dedication to, one, becoming an owner, and then helping other people of color be owners so they can determine their own destiny and play the game they want to play.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Wow.
I was that guy in the beginning stages of my existing Hollywood run. I was content with just selling a script, just making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and saying, oh, I wrote that, it's on the big screen, and I made my money, and that's that. But it wasn't until I met a gentleman who's actually from Gary, Indiana, and one of his his better, I mean, all his films are good, but one particular one that steps out, he did a film called Fatale with Michael Ealy and Hilary Swank. And he did another one before that called Black and Blue, and it was with Tyrese Gibson, and it was about a female cop who, you know, was in trouble. His name is Deion Taylor. And Deion Sharer, he's like, look, dude, he's like, you need to own all your stuff. He said, because, you know, when you're talking about streaming platforms and you're talking about those sorts of things, if you don't own it and you take a little bit of cut of that, he was like, can you imagine going over to Tokyo somewhere and you see a film that you wrote playing in Tokyo and it's a hit over there and all you got was a smidgen to give the rights away? He said, no, you have to own your stuff. And so my wheels started turning, Pastor, like you said, it is a bit of a being neutered, you know, in the sense where if you don't own your stuff and somebody else owns it, if they own your stuff, they own you.
Right.
If they own your space, they own you.
Absolutely.
And so I feel you on that 100%.
Well, I can say as a younger man, I had a conversation. I went to an event that no longer exists, but it was called Jack the Rapper.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a bomb, and it was where the recording industry came together, Black recording industry. And I was in a room with a guy that said, look, he said, close the door. He said, now I'm going to tell y'all the truth today. And he said, the only reason I can tell you the truth is because I own all my stuff and ain't nothing nobody can do.
Wow.
But he said, I'm going to put you up on game and you got to understand it. And he said, in the music industry, there's this thing called the master tape. And he said, it's called that because whoever owns it is master.
Wow.
And he went through how he owned the master's tape to a Christmas album. And he said, every year I get $300,000 to $400,000 every year for the last 20 years because I own this master. And he said on the years that the format changed, like he said, when we went from 8-track to CD, that year it doubles. And he said every year, he said, I will will this to my children. And every year they'll get $300,000 to $400,000 because I own the master. And he was saying how all these people that are saying they have labels, he said they really don't have labels because they don't own the master. He said whoever owns the master is the master. And he just really said what you were saying, D, about they will give us the illusions of control. But if you don't own it, you don't control it.
That's one of the biggest issues I think that I run into in my business is when you get a new artist or a new company that's popping up. And, you know, in the beginning, I never went through the season of lowballing myself.
Yeah.
It's not something that I've ever done. I paid and worked very, very hard to get the education that I have. I've worked very, very hard, you know, in a spiritual sense, to be sharpened, to be able to produce and create, and the things that the Lord has put in me to come out to be a blessing and benefit to someone else. And so my attitude has always been, you know, in the beginning, I was excited that somebody asked me a question, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of just flood them with all these ideas. And I started to notice that people were taking what I said and running with it and getting paid for it. And I was getting a thank you or a high five or, you know, you're smart, but those didn't come with a check.
Right.
And so I think I've said it before. I remember probably about 8 or 9, maybe 10 years ago, there was a lady at the church that I was going to at the time. She was pitching an international radio show. And she was having a roadblock on, like, you know, how to pitch it and like themes and narratives and stuff like that. And so she asked me to help her with it. So I went home, prayed, sent her, you know, the things that I had heard in prayer, and I went with it. So, you know, a couple months went by, and, you know, they stopped coming to church, her and her husband. And I didn't really think anything of it because that's not uncommon behavior. So when they did come back, they pulled up in a really, really nice car. I didn't think anything of it because that's uncommon behavior. or that's common behavior. And so we're talking, and I said, hey, what happened with the radio show? She's, oh, I never told you, I got the bid. And I was like, well, how much was it? She said $250,000. And I looked at her like, now, I labored in prayer for a couple of weeks for your dream, and you walked away with $250,000, disappeared, and then pop up here in this really, really nice Mercedes-Benz truck, and you and your husband looking all glamorous. And had I not asked you, I would have just assumed that he got a raise or you got a raise, and it was really this bonus. And so I made it a point at that point to tell myself I'm valuable. If I walk into a room and you can't pay me, then you don't want me. Another thing that I had to teach people that I'm working with, and something that I don't necessarily struggle with anymore, is that treat me the same way you would treat the white person who's a little bit more established than me. Now, I'm coming at this from a completely different set of angles. They're only concerned about what they're going to give you, but I'm looking at it from an ethical standpoint, a moral standpoint, a visual standpoint, how it's going to affect myself, how it's going to affect my clientele. And so if you walk in here and tell me, your price is too high, then that means you don't want me. And because I'm a good person with a good name, my client, who you really, really want, ain't going to work with you. And so you're going to treat us right, the first time. What I'm saying? You're going to handle us right the first time. I may be your first go-to, but I'm the liaison. And because I treat this individual so well and I respect them so well, which is something that I learned in ministry, to cover your leaders, cover your people, those that you're with. And so because I treat them well, I do my clients the same exact way. So if you a messed up individual trying to swindle me, they're not going to work with you because I can be trusted.
So let me ask you both this question. So I do believe we have an adversary called the devil. And what I know is when you pursue destiny, when you pursue purpose, that Satan will always offer you an out-of-court settlement. He will always have a moment where you've persevered through the original trial, and now he's ready to offer you an out-of-court settlement. I said the settlement is, I'll give you less than you deserve so you don't have to go through the trial. So for both of you, what was that sellout moment, that moment you could have sold out, but you didn't?
At the beginning stage of the pandemic, before I decided to hunker down and go after and do the thing that God had called me to do, me and my wife had a conversation. And she's what I call a farmer, and I'm a hunter. Farmers, they plan, they strategize, they plant the seed, they water it, they go through the whole thing. Hunters is like, I don't know what I'm gonna eat today, but I'm gonna eat. And that has always been my mentality. And so when we got married, it was almost like she wanted me to acclimate to being a farmer. And I'm like, I can't do that. I'm a hunter. With that having been said, there was a moment where we talked about me going and driving again, because I was a truck driver for a minute. And we talked about me using my CDL and being able to bring in money to the house and this sort of thing. And we noticed that I kept getting fired or released from every job that was the out of the court settlement. Every single one, whether it be another TV station, whether it be trucking companies, they were all kicking me out. And there was one moment where I was concerned. I was in LA and she was in Indy, and we were having a conversation, and I was concerned about what I was going to do for money for the next however long it was. And she looked at me and she said, it's time to draw the line in the sand. Either do it or don't. And she made the declaration. She said, I will take care of us until your change comes. But you got to promise me that you're going to go hard. Don't mess around. And it was at that moment I was like, oh man, now I'm accountable. Now it's no more messing around. And the shuttle was a seasonal thing for the Indiana State House, and I got the call, $25 an hour, $25 an hour just to drive in a circle, 14, 15 hours a day. There were 13 hours, 13, 14 hours a day. Drive in a circle, pick people up, drop them off, $25 an hour, and then you get overtime. That's a nice little chunk of change every week. And she looked at me and she said, you ain't going back. And I'm like, I can't go back. And so at that point, I turned down the out of court settlement and said, all right, let's lock this in. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did.
I think for me, it was choosing myself over the people that knew that I was this person, but were scared that I was this person. And he used really, really important relationships to stagger me, to corner me, to stop me from pursuing. People that I love, that I trust with my life, were the ones that were like, well, how can you do that for them and you can barely do it for yourself? How you gonna teach somebody about being, financially literate and your finances ain't right? How you gonna tell somebody about managing stuff and you can barely manage your life? This is what people were saying. But I knew that this is who I was. And whether I was doing it today or doing it tomorrow, this is what I was supposed to be doing. The other thing was I started paying attention to how people that were close to me begin to categorize me once I came into the knowledge of who I am. And so it was okay for them to talk about how great they were and how good they were, whatever it was they were doing. I never rebutted that. That wasn't my job. If you said you're the best administrator in America, then you're the best administrator in America. If you want to go to NASA and be on the moon and go to Mars, then I'm not the person that's going to tell you that you can't. I'll be like, yo, listen, so let's try it out to get you to the moon. I don't even have the thought in my mind that it'll never happen. It may take longer for you to get there, but let's do it. But when I said, you know what, I think I want to do brand strategy consulting and help people build their stuff and help them get their stuff off the ground, it was like, how can you do all this? And so when I sat down and started thinking about, it's weird to me that when I'm confident, everybody has a problem. When I'm saying what I'm capable of, everybody has an issue, and I'm arrogant and I have an ego problem. And if you know me, I don't walk around like that at all. I really, really stick to my guns and mind my business. And so when these people started to pass relationships, like some people like literally just walked away from me like, it was my fault. And so I was sitting here one day, I say, I'm not an insecure person. I've never been insecure or jealous. Those are two things that you don't ever get from me, ever. Because I don't feel that there's a need to be jealous of you, because what you have, I can get easily. It's not a problem for me. Even when I didn't have the money that I have now and have a private jet and clients across the country and across the world, that wasn't a problem for me. I didn't never want what you had because it was yours. I'm not insecure because I know what happens when I walk in a room. I know what happens when I walk. You're all paying attention, whether you're paying attention or not. You know what I'm saying? So I knew that. But I sat there, I said, you know what? I think it's interesting that everybody has a problem when I rose. And that was the contract. When my family and people started saying, well, you need to calm down because you think you all that. And I literally had to tell myself, you know what? It's okay. What are they really saying? They're really, really concerned that you're going to go ahead of them. They don't understand, that God is pushing you somewhere else, or that he has a task for you to do that's going to help them. But if I quit pursuing, when David asked God, when they stole the family and everything, so I could pursue, recover, and overtake all, and God said, yes, you will. That's the same thought that I had. I got to pursue, recover, and overtake all enemies, anyone in my way, anyone in my path, because I have to stand before God. And what they didn't understand was that when I'm done, when I've achieved what I have now, I can send my mama to London tomorrow to go get a purse. You know what I'm saying? I pay, for my sister has a 5-bedroom house. My nieces, I'm putting one through law school right now. I'm putting one through dental school. Had I not done what I was supposed to do, my wife doesn't have to worry about anything. My kids don't have to worry about anything. Had I not done those things, that was the contract. my relationships with people who were important, or my destiny. And I chose my destiny. And now they're glad that I did.
Wow. That's strong. For me, I think it was a moment where I got, it felt like I had failed. I was focused on my first mall. I had been working on developing this economic development model for the mall. It was it was going to be probably north of $250,000, $250 million in redevelopment, but it was going to empower a large number of minority people to
Right.
be their own bosses. And I got outbid on the property. And it seemed like everything I worked for had gone away. And I could have easily gone another way. And actually, it
Right.
made sense for me to go another way. But God reminded me when He had given me the vision was never for one property. It was to create a model that could be duplicated throughout the country. And what I began to recognize was there were distressed malls in almost every major city. And in most cities, it was always the one mall that was considered the Black mall that had degenerated to tennis shoes and jewelry.
Every time.
And hip hop clothing. And not that those are degenerative things, but they didn't have major anchors.
Right.
Right.
Were not well kept. And so when I recognized that, it was that thing that our people have already done, always done, which is take what nobody else wants and make it great.
Absolutely.
Pastor, when you first asked the question, and as Toby was talking, it really kind of made me think about the very first 40-day fast I went on. My son, he and I had a conversation, and he was sharing with me the significance of the number 40. And he was like, "Pops, you got to do this. You're 40 years old. 40 is the number of transformation." And I'm like, "Where'd you get that from?" And he's like, "Well," he said, "Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, 40 days." He's like, "Then it rained 40 days and 40 nights." He was like, he went on 40, 40, 40. And so as I began to fast, I remember there was a point probably about day 19-ish, somewhere around there. I was ready to quit. I was really hungry. I had never gone past, 3 days with no food. When I had done 21 days, it was always like the Daniel's fast, no meats, no sweets, that sort of thing. But I'd never gone this far with no food. And I distinctly remember one day I was in prayer. The Lord spoke to my spirit. He said, what might have happened had Jesus come off the cross? Woo.
That's serious.
And so when you talk about taking that early pay and taking that lesser, Jesus could have come off that cross anytime he wanted to.
Yeah.
But because he didn't, we still talking about it all this time later.
Pastor, question for you. So you, as a person who is a developer, when you're going into what was your most difficult venture? Because you've always talked about wanting to empower the African American dollar, the African American entrepreneur in particular. So what was your hardest project in what city and why?
Well, the hardest project was the first one because you're developing proof of concept. So after you have proof of concept, almost every place, like I'm sure D could say, after you sold your first piece.
Yeah.
Second and third one is easy because you can
go.
always point back. So it was that very, very first one, and Tavi is almost identical to what you said, is because you have to believe when you have no evidence. So there's something in you that knows the truth, but you don't have that thing you can point to say, "See, I told you." And so then when Satan tries to raise those other concepts of like, see, I told you, you don't have evidence to fight with. And so that's the moment of what I call raw faith, where you have to believe in you because you believe in you and you have no proof to show why you should believe in you. So I think that was my most difficult moment.
When I was writing Nuck and Futz, the very first, the series, there was a period, Pastor, and I thank you for that because that blessed me. It reminds me of how I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, every morning, with no evidence that I was ever going to be who I knew I was. And there was some mornings where I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I didn't even write. I just sat there. It's like, all right, well, what are we going to do now? But I continued to get up because I, like you said, I knew there was something inside of me, and it's just it'll drive you, it'll drive you to, and like you said, other people can't see it, they just can't. I heard Will Smith one time say, he said, if you waiting for everybody to get on board with your dream, he's like, you're gonna be waiting for a long time. He said, and sometimes you got to talk to yourself. He said, and then once you get the ball rolling, there'll be other people coming along like, you know what, man, you are kind of dope. And then everybody gets on board. And that's where we at now. But, people, it was hard. It was slim pickings in the beginning because people were like, you want to do what? You talking about doing what?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, why? Or what you gonna do that for? And you be like, why are you afraid? I'm not. It reminds me of the 12 going to spy out the land and 2 saying, listen, I know there's giants over there. That ain't my business. But that's ours because God said we own it. And 10 are like, no, I don't know about all that. They bigger than us and they fight harder than us. So you got 2 like, are y'all fools? Do y'all realize who we are? More importantly, do you realize who sent us over here to go do this work? I mean, I think the biggest part of it for the 3 of us is, I know you making your first deal. I know for me, it was the integrity. You walk into a room and you got people who are willing to be so cutthroat and so nasty and so treacherous. And I'm not willing to do all that. If I got to be all that to get you to write this $1 million check, then I'm just going to have to walk out of here. We're not going to make it. And I've told clients before, look, I do the research on these people before we even walk in here with them. I know their brand, I know their past, I know their present, I know their history, I know all of the things that they've done and people that they've connected to and how those relationships were formed and how they're being sustained. We could potentially be getting into bed with somebody who can ruin your career or your name forever and mine. So if I'm working on destiny, you got to be working on destiny. And some of those things mean that there's some losses that we've always had to take because I personally was like, listen, if I'm managing you, which is more so mentoring and guiding you, you may know more about your industry than I do in terms of your talent. But the business aspect of it is why I focus a lot of my efforts on up and coming brands. And, you maintain the big ones that you have. But when a Black person comes to you with an idea, a white institution that is, has made its business on appropriating our talents and our gifts, they're quick to offer you something. You so happy to get some money. And I'm sitting at the table like, that ain't enough.
Right.
Like, you're going to offer her $1 million for this. We'll be back because your competitor may offer her 5 with residual income on the back and front end. And so that, but you're not trying to come up off of that. And so once we say you the idea, it, like as you said earlier, it belongs to you. And so for all of me and my clients, it's like whatever we create, whatever we're doing, you need to make sure that there's generational wealth attached to it. So when you're dead and gone 30 years from now, your kids can still benefit from it.
Well, I developed a message here lately that I'm really proud of the thought. I try not to preach on the show, but
we like it.
The title of the message was, it's not stupid, it's supernatural. And it's like, anytime you encounter supernatural success, there's a moment that it seems stupid.
Man,
Every story in the Bible. You know, that's what Naaman did when they told him to dip in the river. He's like, this stupid. Why am I going to get down in this nasty river? In these rivers better, because I tell people this, everybody I know that's been successful, there was always a moment it made sense to quit.
oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You consider Noah. God tells Noah, build an ark. For what? Rain. What's rain? And for 120 years, he worked on something that no one had ever seen. Now, I tell people, I'm like, can you imagine?
That's deep.
If 40 years is a generation, then we're talking about 3 generations have watched this man build something for something that no one's ever seen.
Yeah.
Kids walking with his grandfather. Granddaddy, who's that? Oh, that's Noah. What's he doing? He's building an ark. For what? It's this thing. He says this thing called rain is coming. 40 years later, that kid is walking with his grandson. Granddaddy, who's that? My granddaddy talking about Noah. And so can you imagine?
Yeah.
And it, like you said, at some point, you think Noah be like, you know what? This is crazy. I can't.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Yes,
Nobody
but he believed.
blame you. That's the tough moment, is when you're at the moment that if you quit, nobody even blame you. They'd be like, dude,
Exactly.
got it. I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good example. That's a good example, especially when I think what sustains people like us who are professionals and who have, you know, God says, hey, go do this, you're going to be successful. And I know for me, there was a season where, you know, when I chose to go into graduate school to get the education that I wanted, God completely changed everything. I wanted to go to school to be a doctor. I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. That was my thing. They easily clear $800,000 a year. You know, I was going to be good. We're going to get our Benz and our Beamer. We're going to help people. Great. Then you get to your roadblock in the area that I'm not comfortable with, which was chemistry. I was like, listen, I can either spend all of my college years trying to do this, or we can figure something out. So I decided to work on leadership, and then I wanted to go to school I wanted to eventually be a college president, university president up in HBCU, and God completely threw riches in all of those plans. And then I ended up, you know, majoring in organizational leadership and supervision and focusing on strategy and strategic planning, development, and implementation of whatever it may be, strategy. And so I remember when I took a year off because I didn't know what to do. All my plans had failed, but God said I would be successful. So I'm trying to figure out successful at what? Because there's a difference between me being good with kids and good with this and good with that. But there's something in particular that you want me to be successful at that's bigger than me, that's more important than me. And I have to be committed to the term success in whatever area that is. And so when he said, go back and go get this, his exact words were, go get this degree, because you're going to need it later. I said, cool. I thought later was as soon as we walked across that stage, shake with your right, grab with your left, you off the stage, all right, I'm ready to go. But then I had to go through working for people that I didn't like. Bad managers, people who were jealous because you were just naturally good at what you were doing as a leader. You understood how to serve people, how to treat people, working with the most difficult of individuals, learning that every single manager is not your friend, some post, all of these things, getting fired from this job, fired from that one, talking about what you're going to become and everybody's laughing at you is exactly probably what Noah went through, you know. Y'all, and imagine people lining up with popcorn and dates and figs, laughing at him while he's building, because he had, as you said, that faith that I may be dead. And that's what's so deep about this. You may be dead and may not even see the manifestation of that which God told you to begin. Like David, you know, passed everything on to Solomon. So Solomon was the multi-billionaire, trillionaire, gazillionaire. David never got to see it. But David's obedience from the onset of Samuel anointing him, even through his mistakes, created this residual wealth and income for generations to come, because he knew that when God said you would become this, that if you were obedient, because prophecy and all those things come with conditions, you know, so if you do this, this is going to happen. If you don't, this ain't going to happen. And so what I could appreciate in listening to both of you guys is that I'm in the midst of individuals who are on their way to get a star on the Walk of Fame, and who was sitting in seat with Spielberg, and people are calling to ask him 1,005 questions. And you're counseling, Pastor, the greatest leaders in America and in the world on speed dial, and here it is, we're just having a regular conversation.
Right.
And so the beauty of that is that when God said to go do this, everyone did it, and no one ever asked a question about, what's it gonna cost? We are very much Noah in our own right. We're very much Noah in our own right.
Well, I can tell you there was a moment for me, because that's always been a nagging question. Like when I was in school, I studied Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. And my question was always, God, why him? Why'd you pick him?
Right.
Right. And so there was a moment when I said to God, okay, God, why me? And I was hoping that God would give me some great answer, like intellect or your charisma or your intelligence or your speech delivery. And God simply said this to me, because I knew you wouldn't quit.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's all it takes, is somebody that won't quit.
When Pastor, thank you so much for that. I mean, and wow. I say that a lot to you, because you say some things that be like, boom.
Every week.
You know what I'm saying?
Every week.
There was a period where I was going through a third divorce. My children and I were estranged from one another. They, for whatever reason, we weren't talking. And I did not know what I was going to do. And I went running. And we had a track around the house that we had in Indy, a track across the street. And I went running on that track one day. And in my spirit, I heard the Lord say, "You are my dark horse pick." Wow. And there were times when I would forget that. And whenever I would have a moment of a small victory and go into a place of worship and praise, the Lord would remind me, "I told you, you're my dark horse pick." And as I started to believe what the Lord had shared with me about myself, that's when, Toby, and I love how you put it, that's when I got the opposition from family, from people I'd known my whole life, the whole rip. And it got really uncomfortable, to the point where my nickname I'll say it, and I haven't said it in forever, but my nickname was Weenie, Weeny.
Wow.
And I remember I was in prayer, and I was like, "Lord, what you said I'm your dark horse pick. What does it take for me to operate in that?" And the Lord said, "First examine that nickname." And I was like, "The nickname?" And he said, "Look it up." Holy Spirit said, "Look it up." And I looked it up, and do you know that nickname literally means insignificant?
Wow.
He said, and here you are answering. I called you my dark horse pick, and you're answering to insignificant. Hey, insignificant, what you been up to? Oh, nothing. He was like, no. Yeah. The pushback that I got from family and friends by saying, "Never call me that nickname again." Well, I've always called you that. Not anymore. Don't ever call me that again. I'll never answer to that nickname again.
Wow.
And once I decided I was gonna listen to what the Lord said and not answer to that nickname again, the Lord said, "Now I want you to see yourself as this." And it's been on my phone for the last 5 years. I've never changed the wall. Any phone that I get, this wallpaper is the standard. And I don't know if you can see that, but it says, "I am the greatest screenwriter in the history of Hollywood."
Yes, you are, sir.
And it has my autograph on there. And I've had people ask me, what does that even mean? How can you become the greatest screenwriter in the history of Hollywood? What does the greatest screenwriter in the history of Hollywood do? What the greatest screenwriter in the history of Hollywood does is usher in a new era of healing, because that's my calling, to usher in an era of healing into Hollywood. And so Nuck and Futz was the very first thing that I did. And then all the rest of them came. So thank you both for so much for reminding me of where I come from. Because sometimes you get a little success, sometimes you can forget. You be like, oh, I'm that dude, and you get to,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Right here reminds me of where I've come from. Thank you so much.
Well, I can tell you, for me, I had a moment in prayer like that, and so I in my first book I wrote on the power of words and affirmations, and I'm gonna be real transparent. So God told me, okay, so create an affirmation for where you are, and I said, I'm the greatest preacher teacher in Indianapolis. And God said, why so small?
Woo. Woo.
And I said, I'm the greatest preacher and teacher in Indiana. And God said, why so small? I said, okay.
Right.
Uncomfortable. But I said, okay, I'm the greatest preacher teacher in the country. And God said, why so small?
Wow, man.
And I was like, and so now my mind is really wrestling. It's like, well, how can you say you're the best preacher teacher in the world? What about Jakes? What about, all these brilliant orators? So I said, I'm the best preacher teacher in the world. And God said, why so small?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I mean, it was, and then when I started speaking it, D, it was like I had this internal battle that wanted to argue with what I was saying. I wish I could blame it on just other people.
Yeah.
I had an internal battle that sometimes I'd say, you are the best preacher teacher in the universe. And my voice would start saying, are you crazy? You think you can claim you the best? What about Noel Jones? What about TD Jakes? What about Jeremiah Wright? What about, and it's like, I'm not trying to put anybody else down.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I struggled with believing the concept myself. But I had to keep saying it until I didn't feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting thing that you say. Like, that's just helping me, as it always does. Just the whole concept of the war within. It intensifies as you begin to create. You get your first opportunity, you get your first deal, and the enemy is like, "Oh, you got that check? That was really, really nice. Okay, that's enough. Stop." And you're like, "But no, like and I get it. Like when someone says, "Oh man, you good, you be," and it's interesting because we as a people are always downplaying our greatness, and it's never ever validated until somebody who's bigger, more in particular, more so Caucasian, comes along and says, "Hey, you're great." What I like, for example, with D. I don't know if you saw, you probably were in the audience when this happened too, but when Tyler Perry was on the BET Awards talking about owning a plantation or a Confederate base, and that he got tired of fighting with Hollywood, and so he built his own table and brought us there to go eat, and it has established relationships where his platforms and his shows are relevant. He openly said it, I'm creating for my people. And it's amazing to me because African Americans who are successful always have to kind of downplay that cause. And I was telling somebody the other day, it's interesting how we always in our community, depending on where we are, to be politically correct, we'll use the term people of color. You don't ever hear Hispanics use the term people of color. You don't hear Asians use the term people of color. They say for the Asian community. for the Hispanic Latino community or whatever other community. We as Black people, as you said earlier, are dangerous because of the talent and the anointing and the smear I personally believe that God has placed on all of us. Which is why everybody is coming to take something. When Pastor has said earlier, you know, we've made it. Our resiliency wasn't something that we necessarily wanted. We were turned into that. So we took what was given to us and we made it great. And now they want it back. You know, so, you know, you took the mall in Houston in a Black community that was basically down and invested your own $250 million, and now everybody from Saks Fifth Avenue and H&M and Express want a spot, but wouldn't give it a shot 10 years ago.
Right.
When it was owned by themselves, they just allowed the jobs in the community to be desolate. And then you come along and say, well, listen, I'm a billionaire, so I figure we can go ahead and invest in this. And, you know, I'm okay with the turnaround on it. And now it's a hustling, bustling, thriving thing. I mean, I have a couple of clients in your mall, you know what I'm saying, who are doing a couple of things. And so just to hear that piece of it to me is important, that if anyone takes away anything from this conversation is that the enemy is going to always try your dream. Yeah. But if he's trying your dream, it's because he knows he can't go into eternity. He ain't that powerful, but he definitely understands when God says something's supposed to be, how serious your obedience is to that word.
Yeah.
And who it's going to who it can potentially affect, you know. So, and I appreciate it.
That call at the forefront. I think that's the hard. Now, the good thing about me, because I'm a minister, we have a concept that I think is easier than everybody else. We have a calling scripture. Most African American preachers have a calling scripture. Mine was Isaiah 61. And it makes it clear. And, you know, I got stuck at the first part that says the Lord God is upon you because the Lord has anointed you to preach good tidings to the meek, and it goes on. But later in the thing, I didn't recognize the true call was, it said, and you shall rebuild the waste places.
Yes. Yeah.
The former desolation of many generations. And so it is that epitome for me that, you know, it's easy to get caught up. Well, I got this much money now, I can do this, or I don't have to do this, or I can play in a bigger game. But the key is not forgetting the call.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely.
The reason God put you in this place, and you only stay valid as long as you remember your call.
You know, Pastor, and I think that's why the scripture says, when it talks about David, it says, and the Spirit of the Lord was with David all the days of his life. Because David, he paid reverence to the call and he never got away from it. Even though, you know, like Tal, you saying, he didn't live to see some certain things. He stayed true to his portion of that bigger picture. I think that's key.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we need to wrap up, but let me do it this way. If you could go back 6 years and tell your 6-year younger self something to make your journey easier, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself, you gonna win. It's all right. Keep going.
I would tell myself to have tunnel vision like you always have. Don't be worried about who is for or who is against. You know what the most powerful voice that spoke to you said.
And I would probably say, don't buy into the false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been the code. I've had a good time. You know, it's nothing like 3 African-American Black men that have overcome. That's gone from, I guess, what we could call ashy to classy, I don't know about that ashy part. I still got some ash, but
Good old lotion, Doc.
I got it. Well, we thank you for joining us here on The Code.
Yeah.
We invite you to explore the call on your life.
Absolutely.
Why are you here?
Mhm.
What are you supposed to do? And don't let anything deter you from it. This is The Code. Join us again next week.